Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Yeah Yucca, where we cover culture, conspiracy, carnivore, and Christ consciousness. So today I want to talk a little bit about kind of like all around healing. A lot of people, when they think about becoming healthier, they mostly just think about food, eating better food and eating more like whole foods, cutting out processed foods and junk foods and things like that. But healing actually, it involves a whole lot more than that. And the first step is the food, I would say, which it can be easy or hard, depending, it's different for everybody, but I would say that changing the way you eat is the first step in becoming a more healthier version of yourself, which it can take a long time and it can look different for everybody. But definitely looking at the food, I'm not saying it's not important to to not eat healthy and just look at these other things, but eating better is definitely the first step for sure. But our bodies are our temples, and they are temples of the Holy Spirit. And so I think that's why it's really important to also focus on our inner healing as well, because that's where the Holy Spirit is supposed to be living inside of us. And so it's really important to make sure that we're not easily that we're how do I explain it? Like, we are emotionally and spiritually strong. That way, we can't easily get attacked by evil forces and the devil. And I just wanted to kind of go over that a little bit and talk about some different ways and different things to look at as far as healing and all that good stuff. And I want to say thanks to everybody watching the live stream. I was out last week. I was a little bit under the weather. I'm feeling a lot better now. I probably would have healed a lot faster if I took some more supplements and things like that, but I just kind of went through it naturally and just I'm still getting over it a little bit, but obviously I'm able to do the show and feeling a lot better. So thanks again for tuning in, everybody. So let's get into it. So first thing is that I want to kind of talk about a little bit is childhood trauma. I think a lot of people don't understand what things could be considered as traumatic for a child, that could fall under the childhood trauma. I think a lot more people than we realize experienced childhood trauma, and and some people might never even heal from that stuff because they don't think that it's childhood trauma. So I listed like a few things that some people might not, because it's just so common that these things happen. Like it happens, and just because it happens and it's common doesn't mean that it's normal and that that's how it should be. And so like divorce, like growing up with divorced parents, growing up in either a single parent home, or or sharing the time between the two parents, can be really traumatic for a child. Everybody knows that, obviously, having a father and mother in home, in the a father and mother in the home is ideal for children. And it can be really traumatic for a child not knowing, what's going on, like why aren't they living together and all this stuff. So that's something that it can be considered under childhood trauma, especially if you never realized that it caused you some mental damage as a child and don't heal from it. Some other things are like even just hearing your parents argue, or hearing them yell at each other. And like I know I experienced, both of those things, all those things, and hearing your parents argue and yelling at each other, although it can be common in a lot of families, it's really not normal and shouldn't really be happening in the home, especially around the children. If you ever do get into an argument where you're yelling at each other, definitely try to make sure that the child is not around, because children are so sensitive to that energy. They can pick that stuff up. They haven't been children haven't been corrupted yet, in most cases when they're really young. And so it's easy for children to experience trauma, and just hearing grown adults yelling at each other, like they're going to sense that anger, and they're going to wonder what's wrong, and then they might also like end up thinking that that's normal, and then they might end up getting stuck in relationships where they're always arguing their whole life, and they don't know why it's like that, or why they can't get out of that cycle. And so yeah, just simple arguments in front of the children can be traumatic to them. Bullying, I know, there's some like mixed things on bullying. um but for the most part, like excessive bullying can cause some mental damage as well to children. Even like being poor growing up being poor can also cause you trauma, because even if you grow up, like if you are a child and you grow up in poverty and you have the stressors of being poor, like not knowing when you're going to get your next meal, or if y'all aren't gonna, you're gonna have to eat some cheap food or whatever, like, and then you grow up and you're capable of paying for food and affording things, but that trauma could have affect you to where and when you grow up into an adult, you end up just like always penny pinching, or like always saving the ketchup packets when you go out to eat and things like that, or like holding on to all your leftovers for as long as possible. And like there's little things like that that can affect you in your adult life if you don't realize that you experienced this trauma as a child. And it's like and like these little, like these things, like a lot of people wouldn't think of it as like serious things, because like as I was saying earlier, it's pretty common to happen in a lot of families and households, to experience divorce, arguments, bullying, being poor, and all this stuff. Like it's common for children to experience this, and but a lot of people don't recognize it as trauma, but it is, and it affects you in your adult life. And sometimes the crazy thing with childhood trauma is like a lot of times, or I don't know how, if it's a lot or sometimes, but um, sometimes we don't remember that stuff, and it's like locked away in our minds, because we just kept shoving it back. And but it'll still show up in our lives, like it'll still show up in cycles if we don't ever figure it out and get to the root cause of that. And the best way to figure that out is to through meditation and prayer. And there's a lot of like there is inner child healing. Like there's like meditations, and there's a lot of people out there. I don't know anybody. Nicole Perla, she's one that talks a lot about that kind of stuff too, inner child healing. And and I think that it's something that a lot of everybody should look into, at least to see if you are able to dig up anything. If you don't think you have any childhood trauma, maybe you didn't, and that's great. That'd be, that's really great. You're one of the few for sure, because I know a lot of people have dealt with childhood trauma for sure. But definitely looking into healing childhood trauma. I did these childhood inner child healing meditations. It was called something like that, and they it's a guided meditation. It's like 10 minutes or so, and it was very interesting. It was intense for sure. I did it several times. I did break down crying like immediately the first time, and recognized some things about my childhood that I did not ever realize. Like, but as soon as I recognized it, I knew it just made all these different connections. Once I realized this thing, and it just made all these connections all throughout my life, and then that's why I like just broke down crying. And then, but the inner child healing stuff is very interesting. Um, I definitely recommend looking into inner child healing, and we all have. That inner child that needs the love that we didn't get when we were younger, or we didn't get it the way that we felt like we should have, or the way maybe we had to get attention a certain way, and it wasn't just given to us freely. And neglect is something also that I wrote down here that I missed. I neglected to talk about neglect as being one of the childhood trauma experiences. But yeah, and it's unfortunate because like it's not our parents' fault. We can't blame our parents because they did all these things to us, because they didn't intentionally do that stuff to to give us trauma as a child. Our parents did their best, and our parents thought that they were doing the best that they could for us. And now, like, I feel like a lot of people are learning about all this kind of stuff, about healing and inner healing and doing the inner work, and a lot of people are becoming aware of it. And I just want to iterate one thing that we have to realize and be aware of, is that it's not our parents' fault. They had their own childhood trauma that they had to deal with, that they probably actually never even got to deal with, because they didn't grow up with the internet and all this information like we have. They didn't get to watch videos about girls just talking about how to do inner healing work and things like that. And we're so blessed to be able to have access to all this information, and our parents didn't. So we have to remember that the self-awareness of what's going on is not the same back then as it is with us now. And so we do have to remember that it's not their fault that we grew up with trauma. And and I know that some people did grow up with a really horrible childhood, with parents that were malicious, and had an even more traumatic childhood. And I know that those are even more difficult cases to forgive your parents. But definitely you can still always do the inner healing for yourself, and and realize that it's not your fault also, that you are living through these cycles, or that you are this certain type of way that you don't want to be. And and so but it's different for everybody. um and um Yes. So some other things, as far as like inner healing besides childhood trauma, it's just kind of like something that I've always done, um, or not always, but for as long as I can remember, I've just like always liked trying to figure out, either like as far as like with cooking, for example, like I always try to figure out like doing how to do things from scratch, like how can I do this like in my way as much as possible? And then like as far as like my personality too, like how can I just be a better person? Like how can I just be more kind and friendly and like not necessarily so other people can like me, even though those are really likable traits. Just because I just wanted to be just want to be the best person, the best person I can be. I'm not. Also, I will say though that I'm not really like the type of person that like goes all in all the time with certain projects. It kind of seems like that though because I do have a lot of energy when I get excited about stuff, and I do more than the average person does. But I'll go in a lot of the way. But yeah, I try to, and I'm also trying to learn how to balance it better still because it's still, everything in moderation, and you got to find a good balance on the things that you're doing. Uh, but yeah, um, so I always try to just like for example, with the horoscopes, I'm not really big on the horoscopes, but this is like just like an older memory that I have. So with the horoscopes, I'm a Leo, and I was reading about it, and like they were saying that they get angry easily. They like to be center of attention. They're like very flamboyant and whatever and colorful and energetic and but what I was looking at was like all the negative traits, and I remember like getting angry easily was one of them, and all with along with all the other ones too. I was just like, well, even though that's what that says I am, like that's not what I'm gonna be. And I'm going to defy the horoscope and do the opposite. I'm gonna just take all these bad traits that it says I am, and I'm gonna work on not being like that. Because just because that says that's how I'm supposed to be doesn't mean that that's how I'm supposed to be. And so with the horoscopes, that was one thing I was like, well, it doesn't have to be like that. Let's try to do it better. Let's try to, how do I want to do it? How do I feel is the best way to do it? Um, so that's what I always try to, try to make improvements and things like that. And I saw like a little Jordan Peterson clip the other day, um, talking about like just if you really want to grow or just be a better person, just sit down with yourself and what is that, and ask yourself like what is the one thing like holding me back. And I know I'm butchering this, I don't remember it exactly, but it's something like you just sit down with yourself and you ask yourself like what is the one thing holding me back, or what is the one major change in my life that I need to make right now. And you honestly sincerely ask yourself that, and don't try to hold back the answer. And and that answer will come up, and everybody has a different answer obviously. But sitting down with yourself and saying like, okay, what is the one major thing that I need to do? And then you got to go do it. That's the hard part. That's the hardest part, is actually getting out there and going to do it. And I think that's why also maybe that's also why food is like the first step, because even though it can be hard, especially if you have like sugar addiction and just food addiction in general, which is a real thing, um, the food part, once you get the food part covered and then you move over into this healing work, then you're like, crap, this is hard. Like it's just so much harder doing the inner healing work versus the outer work, I guess you could call it, with eating the better food. Um, but yeah, the inner healing work is definitely the harder work. But God didn't put us here to be lazy. God wants us to be working, and when we do the inner work, it does help us become closer to God and His will. That we not only like meditate to help clear all these negative traumatic experiences out, but it's important to stay in with prayer, so that way we can fill ourselves with God's love and truth. And so, meditation is important, but praying is also important too. Um, we want to make sure that we fill ourselves with God's light. And when we do that, our So like in the Bible, it says our eyes, basically in the Bible, it says that our eyes are our lamps. And so, and that's kind of like why sometimes I feel like that's why sometimes you'll see people with sparkle in their eye. Like I know I've been told that a lot throughout my life. That some people you can see a little sparkle in their eye, and I fully believe that that's just because they have a really close connection to God, and they're really self-aware, and they're just filled with life and literally filled with so much light that it's literally beaming out their eyes. And and then that's also why you'll see a lot of people where they have lifeless, dull eyes, and they literally look like just walking zombies. And and you're talking to them, or you're trying to talk to them, but you're more like you're talking through them, and they're hearing what you're saying, but they're not listening. And and talking about that, like it's just makes me think of a lot of babies and children over the last several years. It could be because of the shots or the formula or whatever, all those chemicals that they're putting inside of the babies, could be causing this. But a lot of babies that I've noticed, like in the last maybe less than a decade or so, babies are just, you say hi to them and they just look at you. They just give you that blank stare, and they don't give you any kind of response. And and babies are supposed to be like so full of life. They're literally just born. They should be reactive and responsive to everything. Like they're learning all these things. They're seeing all these things, these new things move and things like that. And and I've noticed that with a lot of babies and a lot of toddlers, they just give you like a blank stare. And it's so sad because the babies are supposed to be pure. And it just really breaks my heart when I see kids like that. And I know that there are some kids that are shy, but it's just something that I've noticed that's like really, really apparent in a lot of babies and a lot of kids. I don't know if something it's something that you guys have noticed. Um, in babies and toddlers over the last several years. But yeah, just the non-responsive babies and kids, it just like really breaks my heart, because I love babies and kids and I love playing with them. And and I have my friend, she home birthed her child like totally super clean, and no shots or nothing. And he eats like he's eating now, and he's doing some bone broth and all the good foods and all that stuff. And like that baby is alive. Like he will look at every single thing, like, and he will respond. And and he looks at you, and his eyes are, they are so sparkly bright. And and it's just so sad when you run into babies like that, that they're just not responsive. And they're not even like saying hi back to you, and they have this whole world that they still have to discover, and they're not even capable of comprehending uh, what they're looking at. Or I don't really know what's going on there, but you can definitely tell that there's some sort of disconnection there, when you look at people's eyes and you don't see that sparkle, you don't see that light, beaming through. And again, why it's important to do the inner work, um, so we can get closer to God and His will for us. And yeah. So focusing on our inner work, it's just really important to stay overall healthy, and be closer to God. And I know it's really difficult for a lot of people, myself included. It's something that I've been doing for years and years, and it never gets easier. I can tell you that for sure from lots of experience of trying to do inner work and healing. And it's a never ending journey, I would say. Especially if you're the kind of person that just always wants to prove and always wants to be, better than the day before. And it's very interesting though, because like you can go through some difficult things that think will prepare you to do better in the future, or you think you're capable of doing something, or you plan to respond a certain way in a certain scenario, and then you get through that situation and you're like, that's not what I was wanting to do that whole time. Why did I do that? And then it's just a whole nother learning lesson that you get to learn and hopefully learn. That's one thing that I think a lot of people struggle with too, myself included, because I am human. And something that it's whenever you're struggling through something, something is just like getting really hard on you, really stressing you out. A lot of times it is, you know God trying to show you something and redirect you, or tell you a message, or one he's been working with me with lately is patience. That's something that, I feel like he tries to teach us a lot of. And I thought I had way more patience than I thought I did. I had already known that I was more patient than a lot of people, a majority of people actually. And this last year, God has definitely been growing my patience like insanely. Like I don't have the most patience still, but definitely I have definitely grown my patience. And um, it's so funny because sometimes, like, when you learn about healing and you do the healing for so many years, and then you come to the realization, like, oh, every tragedy is a lesson, or like every sad thing that happens, or every difficult thing, or anything that upsets me, there's always something good that you can get out of it. And then but then, like, is it bad that you realize that that bad thing is just like, or like you get the bad thing that happens and you're like, oh, this is good, this is a good thing, like there's a lesson in here, like let me see, like let me figure out what this lesson is. And then I just think it's funny because then you can get caught in this cycle, um of like not necessarily like looking for the bad things to heal from, or looking for the bad things to find lessons, life lessons out of, but like, I mean, and it's what's that Bible verse? I can't remember the Bible verse. Um, Let me see if I can find it. But let me see. Give me one second. I didn't really prepare for this show. I tried to, but then I had to do other stuff. Um, and Here it is. So the Bible verse, Romans 5:3-5. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who is given to us. And that it's just kind of saying like that we need to find joy in our sufferings. And so, like, what if you get caught in this loop of like, oh, something bad's happened, like, okay, well, we have to find joy in that, right? And then, like, because there's a lesson to be learned there, or we have to uh produce endurance and character and hope and all this stuff. And it's just what if you get caught in that loop of like finding sufferings so you can get more character? Is that a toxic cycle? I don't know. I was thinking about this just yesterday, and I just thought it was kind of funny, um, because if you get in that cycle of like constantly wanting to heal, and it's definitely something different. I've never thought about it like that, even though I've been doing this for a really long time. Um, but Yeah, it's so interesting, and I've just been learning a lot to lean on God, and not into my own understanding. And a lot of times, uh when we start to learn our cycles, that's that's kind of like one of the first steps of being able to start inner healing. And then you can ask yourself like, well, why does this keep happening? And then you just kind of like go backwards and try to figure out where it started, or try to like I was talking about earlier, looking into the inner child healing work, to see if you can get to some memories that were pushed back there from when you were a child, um, to try to heal from, and all the good stuff. But yeah, so today is going to be a shorter show. But before I go, I do want to say, if you guys didn't notice, my little Yeka Gold banner, I had it going today. My sponsor, I want to give a big thanks to Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. I'm blessed to have them sponsor the show, and it really supports me if you check out Yeka Gold. I have been working with them recently, and it's been so much fun getting to help organize the business, and I get to help watch the business grow as well. So there's a lot of fun things coming out to Wise Wolf, Gold and Silver, and Wolfpack. And if you want to support my show, you can support me by going to my link and getting some gold and silver, which we all know everybody should be stacking gold and silver. It is kind of imperative, but definitely check them out. Lots of cool stuff over there going on. And thanks again, guys, so much for tuning in. I really appreciate y'all, and I'll see y'all next week.